Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And joining us today is Arthur Phillips, who is a best-selling author of several books, but the one that we want to talk about today mostly is called The Song Is You. It's a novel now in trade paperback, published by Random House. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
It says in the material they sent along that you're beloved. Beloved.
When your mom writes the material.
She's really nice.
Yeah, she's a sweetie.
Oh, dear. At any rate, there are 3 novels prior to this one.
That's right.
And for your many fans out there, we better mention each and every one of them. Otherwise, we'll be in some
You'll be hearing from my mother.
Your mother, yeah. It's okay. The first novel was called Prologue, a national bestseller, named the Notable Book of the Year by the New York Times, and received, in my opinion, a very important award, the Los Angeles Times Art Seidenbaum Award. The reason that's important to me is that at one time in my career, I used to go down to Los Angeles and present books to Art Seidenbaum.
Oh, no kidding.
And it was the most pleasurable part of being a publicity director that I ever experienced. And then that novel has been translated to 7 languages. The second novel is called The Egyptologist, and that was an international bestseller and sold in 24 countries, including Egypt.
No, they would have nothing to do with it.
Oh, well. And then the most recent novel before this one is called Angelica, which is also a national bestseller. And having looked at all that and having got started reading the book, I came up with a question that I'm not sure I have an answer for. Where in terms of who you are and what you've done does this book come from? And my answer is, it says somewhere in the biographical notes you're a jazz musician.
Well, I was. I did play jazz professionally for a few years, but maybe more important for this book is I'm a music lover. And before I was a musician, after I was a musician, I was obsessed and addicted to my music collection in the various forms it's taken over the decades now.
When you were a jazz musician, did you travel?
A little bit, yeah, but mostly I played around Boston, but yeah.
One of the things about this book, I think, that's really very right on is the traveling musician aspect of it.
There's a great song by Dave Frishberg, I Want to Be a Sideman, and he talks about it. He wants to catch the early train.
Oh, good Lord. So, at any rate, one of the major themes of The Song Is You is a deep appreciation for what, can I call it popular music?
Sure. Over
the ages. And it's an appreciation that begins in the prologue, which focuses on an incident in the life of Will Donahue. Who is Will?
Well, the main character in the book is Julian Donahue. Will was his father, whose presence is felt throughout the novel, although he's no longer alive when the novel begins. But the prologue opens with an episode from his father's life back in 1953.
And would you read part of it, please?
I'd be glad to. Julian Donahue's father was on a Billie Holiday record. He loved her music back when it was hip, not fashionable, a fan's distinction. April of 1953, on leave from the Army, 4 days prior to his deployment to Korea, where, who knows, his 18-pound contribution to that eternal stalemate may have been the final increment of military sacrifice necessary to balance the scales, prevent defeat, and fix the parallel. He took the train from Virginia up to New York, and he saw his idol perform at the Galaxy Theater, which is now, if you're the sort to track down historic sites, a 3-story Banana Republic, with a framed photo of Billie Holiday on the butter yellow wall of the dressing room all the way to the left. He spent more than he should have for a third-row seat in the center. He arrived early and lived 90 of the best minutes of his life, shaking his head and sighing, smiling with half his mouth, until, without thinking or hesitating, surprised by the strength of his desire, he shouted, "Waterfront!" during a bustling near silence after the applause for My Man had receded and Billie was consulting with her band, her back to the audience, her golden calves completing the electrical circuit between the hem of her silver skirt and the straps of her black shoes. "I cover the waterfront!" She peered over her shoulder. "Somebody say something?" She purred, sly and sidelong, and laughter speckled the hall. She turned, stepped forward, shaded her eyes against the spotlights, and squinted down into the front rows. "Was that you?" She had addressed him directly. "Yes, ma'am." "Ooh, polite, too." The audience cheered. "Handsome white soldier," she mused, and in his retellings for years after, she now levitated slightly, and every other noise faded away as his goddess coolly examined him groveling down in the pit, eye level with her feet, less than a child, a worshipper. "Did you have a request, honey?" "Miss Holliday, I sure would love to hear I cover the waterfront." "Would you now?" She kept her eyes on him as she turned her head only a little and called to her band. "Well, boys, the pretty gray GI wants waterfront, so let's do that for him. Don't want him to put us on report now, do we?"
That speech is so right, so right on 1950s. It's just great.
Thank you very much.
I just love it. What does the reference there mean? The gray soldier.
It was slang. I think it was Lester Young slang for a white person was
okay.
gray.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
You weren't white, sure. You were gray in Lester Young's vocabulary. So
now the music in your novel now is we jump forward to contemporary times, and the music is not coming out of that theater. It's pouring out of especially iPods and other technical instruments. So that one of the underlying themes of the book, and a very important one, is how modern technology can paradoxically draw us closer together, yet also keep us apart.
Well, music is a very big deal to me, and most of the music that I listen to is pumped through my headphones as I walk down the street, and that's just where I get most of my appreciation for it nowadays. That's as somebody who used to perform it live in clubs and things like that, but most of my music is pumped into my head now.
Even you, an old jazz musician, has been converted.
Exactly.
The song is you. In the song is you, technology does play an important role, but it is a story about some quite fascinating characters, and we're going to meet some of them when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
The Song Is You, a novel by Arthur Phillips, now in trade paperback, published by Random House. That's what we're talking about today. And there was a lovely long review in the New York Times Book Review of the hardcover. We'll share part of that with you now. If novelists were labeled zoologically, what a thought. No, I don't want to go there. Arthur Phillips would fall naturally into the dolphin family, which is pleasant enough. His writing is playful, cerebral, likable, wide-ranging, and inventive. A less rigorous writer might have turned this story into a sentimental, overwritten swamp. But thanks to Phillips's thwarting of our and his characters' expectations, and to his objective, amused intelligence about the deep ways music affects us, he dances like Fred Astaire over any alligators and mangrove roots lurking in turgid waters. Have you ever been compared to Fred Astaire before?
And a dolphin in the same sentence.
Hey, this is pretty good, pretty good. The whole novel zings with fresh insight and inspiring writing. The Song Is You is smaller, more focused, and more character-driven than Phillips's earlier books, and it's not only a welcome new direction, but also a novel impossible to put down. Well, let's talk about some of those characters driving this book. And I think I want to start with Julian. Julian Donahue, middle-aged. He directs TV commercials, terribly successful at it, but he's deeper into music, it seems to me, than his job, and he's deeper into music than perhaps even his dad was.
It's true. He's like me to the extent that he is also plugged into that iPod whenever possible.
Always.
Like always. And he's come to the point where he realizes he's quite good at his job and it has rewarded him, but he's not, and he's accepted that he's not a great artist, which is sort of maybe what he once dreamed he might be. Not a musical artist, but a filmmaking artist in his case. But he's very drawn to the people who are great artists, the people he listens to, the people who he associates the memories of his life to their music, and he's he's vulnerable at this when the story opens. He's waiting for something to happen that'll change the way he feels about his somewhat stagnant life.
He has a brother.
He does.
Do I say Aidan?
Aidan
Donahue.
Yeah.
Who has some great lines in here about music. I mean, he seems to hate music as much as his brother loves it. At one point, he says, "There's one Bach sonata that I can just about bear listening to." One Bach sonata. And later on the efforts of a 1950s pop singer comeback effort in a high-rise hotel. Sounds like Rockefeller Center to me. He says, quote, "The slurpy crooning of the dentured elderly." Now he's tough on
he's a little rough
on music, and he's a guy who's an absolute expert on trivia.
He is.
He's a nut.
He's like some people I may have come across in my life. He's a guy for whom trivia means a great deal, and facts, and that's sort of another aspect of my interests as well, I guess. But it's gone a little far in his case, and it's sort of overwhelmed the other elements of personality.
Yeah, we'll get back to how overwhelming it is in his case. Rachel, married to Julian, and she's the mother of Carlton.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, just saying that, there's a major tragedy that takes.
Yeah, they are estranged. They're not divorced, but they're heading that way now. And they had a 2-year-old child, and the 2-year-old child died. And that's the precipitating event that's left Julian with very little sensation of anything going on around him anymore.
Their absolute inability to, even the words are terrible, to get over that is really one of the awful aspects of what goes on in this novel.
And I think it's what goes on in that terrible case when it does happen. I think it's not, even the phrase "to get over it," I think is probably not possible for anybody, but to somehow integrate it or to take it along with you for the rest of your life, if you're going to choose to have the rest of your life, having gone from being a parent to being childless, whether you're going to move on or not.
Yeah, integrate it somehow.
Is the most terrifying thing I can think of as a father. So
and keep going. The father's war story. I just love it. I mean, he goes to that concert, then he ships out to Korea, and he leaves a leg there. And on the evening that he hears Billie Holiday, if I remember the story correctly, he actually, goes to bed with a French woman. And then what happens with her?
He just, debates whether the love of his life is going to keep him out of the war, but he heads off to Korea, loses a leg, and figures, well, she'll never want to talk to me ever again. She tracks him down in the hospital when he gets back to probably San Diego or something like that, and they end up being married, and that's Julian and Aidan's mother.
I love that story.
It's a nice romance.
I love that. Got so many nice things going on here.
Little of this, little of that. That's life.
Yeah, and there's a somewhat minor character, but I think an important, Ian Richfield, lead guitar to Cato Dwyer.
Well, I think we got to go back to Cato Dwyer for a second. So Julian, the story really starts with Julian walking down the street one night and inadvertently walking into a bar in Brooklyn and hearing a young woman singing, woman half his age. And that's Cato Dwyer, an Irish woman who's moved to New York and is becoming fast rising as a pop star. Stop right there for a second, maybe.
The name of that place is The Rat, and we'll come back to The Rat and some other aspects of this wonderfully written novel, a novel that the New Yorker talks about your neat, abbreviated wit, quality at its sharpest and delectable set pieces. And when we return, we're going to look at one of those set pieces.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. The book we're talking about today is called The Song Is You. The author, who's with us, of course, is Arthur Phillips. And somebody else had something nice to say about this book. Let me see if I can find it. Ah, yes, here it is. The Chicago Tribune. City of the Big Shoulders. Somebody, they say, had to do it, write the great American iPod novel, and we're lucky that it is someone with some talent. Well, and more than some. They could have said with a lot of talent.
You know, it's Chicago.
I think Arthur Phillips is one subtle writer. I think that he's dealing quietly with big themes such as illusion versus reality. That's the truth. That's the truth. Now, one of the things that they mention here is Jeopardy, playing Jeopardy. Tell us about how Aiden plays Jeopardy and what kind of trouble he got in.
Well, Aiden's a trivia person, so it's only natural for certain trivia people that you aim for and maybe get to the mountaintop, which is Jeopardy.
For sure.
Where you can make some money with this strange brain disorder that some of us suffer from. And Aiden gets on Jeopardy, and he does pretty well. He manages the buzzer, and he gets the categories go his way, and the betting is good, and he cleans up for 3 days, and then on the 4th day, he does something terrible. He does the worst thing I could imagine happening to somebody on Jeopardy, which is he has a slip of the tongue. And he means to say one thing, and he says something else, and they leave it on, and it gets broadcast. So as with the death of a child, these are just some of the things that frighten me, and so I imagine them actually happening. I write them down, and then I don't have to worry about them anymore.
Yes, and we will not disclose what it is that happened.
The incident. We'll simply refer to it as the incident.
The incident. That's what it is, the incident. You want to know about the incident? It's now in paperback. It's not all that expensive. Go out and buy a copy. And when you do that, you'll learn more about the singer. I kind of cut you off.
No, not at all.
Kate, tell us some more.
Well, Kate O'Dwyer's 22, and Julian Donohue's 44. So what kind of love affair can they have? And that's sort of one of the questions of the novel. He's damaged. She's sparkling and on the rise. So what's possible there? And different people will have different answers, and I propose one possible answer as to what's possible between two people like that. She's a composite of singers that I was attracted to and listened to this day from a lot of English and Irish women from the early 90s that mean a lot to me. Never met them, but they mean a lot to me.
Wonderful. Now, there's a minor character in here, but he's part of a wonderfully, I think, hilarious piece of business. His name is Detective Stan. I don't think I ever caught his last name.
Stan DiCanio.
Oh, Stan DiCanio. And he works for the New York Police Department.
He does.
And somebody in the book wants him to check up on Julian. And the first part of his checkup on Julian is to interview our singer. And that somehow evolves into a discussion about music. You really don't like Sinatra, he asks her. Honestly? Isn't he don't people like you know he's the source of all pop singing? And she says, people like me, that's an exceedingly narrow category, Inspector. I won't speak for myself, but I will say that people like me think he wasn't any good as a jazz singer, he couldn't swing, and he wasn't any good as a pop singer, he couldn't arouse. He was a court minstrel for thugs. He could scarcely carry a tune. A visual artist, not a singer. That's the worst condemnation of Frank I've ever heard in my life. How could you do that?
I just write imaginary people. These are not my positions.
That's Stan.
Exactly.
I can't blame that on you.
No, that's Kate talking there.
No, that's right, Kate.
But I will say only one thing, which is that one of the many songs that Sinatra made famous, and the name of a biography of Sinatra is "The Song Is You." So I'll just leave it right there.
That's right. Oh yeah. Well, Frank thanks you from wherever he is.
I'm glad he and I are.
I was going to say up there, but
not our department.
Oh dear. The other issue that you raise here as you go through the happenings is the business of aging in a more and more youth-oriented culture. Not an easy business.
No, and I've recently crossed certain boundaries that you can't go back across, not just numerical boundaries in my years, but also I recently realized within the last year or two that most people younger than I am spend their times doing things I wouldn't do and don't approve of, which I think is one of the tip-offs that you're getting old.
Yeah. Oh, you're right.
And I was talking to a friend of mine today, an internet entrepreneur, and he explained to me all the elements of the internet that I don't even understand. I can't imagine why people are spending their times doing these things. I just want them to go back and listen to music and read novels. But there's the tip-off that I'm on my way out.
You're right. So, you're going over the hill. I guess that's
I've
what...
perhaps crested the hill, yeah.
Oh, good Lord. One of the things that you get across very succinctly is the ad man's job. The ad man's job. And it's not a very nice description. Of course, his job as an ad man was to fill the airways with even less plausible myths that joy and love were found in yogurt containers and hair fixative, for example, though, to be fair, he'd once believed that even this was sort of true once. It's a very honest novel. It's going to get a hold of you. You're not going to be able to put it down. It is called The Song Is You. The author is Arthur Phillips. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.